Is your betta fish belly looking swollen? Chances are your betta fish is suffering from swim bladder disease. Keep watching the video because I am going to tell you the signs of swim bladder disease in betta fish. I will also tell you how I treated swim bladder disease in my betta fish so you can too. Besides that, I will also tell you what causes swim bladder disease in the first place, and I will also share with you some helpful tips to prevent swim bladder disease in the future. Signs of swim bladder disease in betta fish. There are a few signs that you can look for to identify swim bladder disease in your betta fish. The most common sign is swollen belly. When a betta fish is suffering from swim bladder disease, you will also notice that the betta fish is struggling to swim properly. This is because when a betta fish is suffering from swim bladder disease, it affects the buoyancy of the betta fish, which makes it difficult for the fish to swim properly. Especially in my case, I noticed that my betta fish was struggling to change directions. Besides, it was also struggling to stay upright. Also, I noticed that my betta fish was staying at the bottom of the fish tank and staying at that place for a long time. In other words, it was not as active as it used to. Other signs of swim bladder disease in betta fish may include curved back or change in appetite. So these are the signs of swim bladder disease in betta fish. So if you noticed any of these signs in your betta fish, chances are your betta fish is suffering from swim bladder disease. Now let's understand swim bladder disease in more detail. Betta fish has swim bladder, which helps with the buoyancy in the fish tank. When this swim bladder doesn't function properly, this condition is called as swim bladder disease. As swim bladder helps with the buoyancy, when a fish is suffering from swim bladder, it becomes difficult for the fish to swim properly and stay upright and float in the water. Now let's see what causes swim bladder disease in betta fish. The most common causes of swim bladder disease in betta fish is digestive problems such as overeating or constipation. Other common causes of swim bladder in betta fish includes low water temperature, which usually lowers the metabolism of betta fish, which leads to swim bladder. Another common reason for swim bladder disease is fish getting into shock because of sudden changes in water parameters such as temperature. In rare cases, swim bladder disease may also be caused due to bacterial or parasitic infection. Besides that, the last cause of swim bladder disease is birth defect. That is, the betta fish may be born with a defect that affects its swim bladder. Now let's see how you can go about treating swim bladder disease in your betta fish. As I mentioned earlier, the most common causes of swim bladder in betta fish is digestive problems such as overfeeding your betta fish or constipation. And this was the case with my betta fish. In my case, it seemed like my betta fish was suffering from constipation. Once I identified the root cause of swim bladder in my betta fish, which was constipation, then I started the treatment accordingly. So the first thing I did was I stopped feeding my betta fish for 3 days. Now you may be thinking feeding your betta fish for 3 days will harm your betta fish, but that is not the case. Betta fish can go up to 1 week without eating any food. So it is totally fine to not feed your betta fish for 3 days if it is suffering from constipation, because not feeding your fish for a longer time will help with the constipation. After 3 days, I fed my betta fish small pieces of green peas, which I first boiled, then removed the outer shell of the peas and cut the peas into very tiny pieces so that it can easily fit into the mouth of my betta fish. Now, when I started feeding my betta fish the small pieces of green peas, first my betta fish didn't eat any, but then my fish ended up eating a couple of pieces, and that was sufficient for me. As betta fish are carnivorous, I think they are not a fan of vegetarian food. That's why I think my betta fish didn't actually eat the green peas in the beginning. But feeding the green peas was important because it actually helps with the digestion. So in this way, after completing the 4 days of treatment of my betta fish looked perfectly normal. The swollen belly was gone, it started to swim properly, and it was active again. So this is how I treated my betta fish. Again, to summarize all of this, first of all, you will need to identify identify the root cause of swim bladder disease in your betta fish, which in my case was constipation. Now to cure swim bladder disease in this case, I stopped feeding my betta fish for 3 days, and after 3 days I fed my betta fish with very tiny pieces of boiled green peas. Now let's talk about how you can go about preventing this disease in the future. When it comes to preventing swim bladder disease in your fish, you will need to get back to the basics, which means that you will need to maintain the good water quality, which means maintaining the temperature within the ideal range that betta fish needs, maintaining the pH within the ideal range that betta fish needs, and keeping ammonia and nitrite at 0 level and nitrates below 20 ppm. The second thing you will need to do to prevent swim bladder disease in your betta fish is you should not overfeed your betta fish. You see, betta fish are not very smart enough to know when they should stop eating food. So if you just keep feeding them fish food, they will just keep eating. This is a very common mistake among beginners, and I have talked about in detail how to avoid overfeeding your betta fish in one of my last videos. So I will make sure to put the link to that video in the description of this video so you can watch the video, and hopefully it will help you to feed your betta fish properly. The last thing you will need to do to prevent swim bladder disease in your betta fish is that you will need to feed high quality foods to your betta fish. What I mean by high quality foods is that the food should contain all the ingredients and nutrients that your betta fish needs for its proper growth and development and digestion. There are a lot of fish foods available in the market for betta fish. That's why it is very confusing to choose the right fish food for your betta fish. So I will make sure to put links to the high quality recommended fish foods in the description of this video so you can easily check it out. I hope you found the video helpful. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more betta fish related videos. Thanks for watching. Happy fish keeping.